So business is hard. Business is hard for people who have money. It's hard for people who don't have money. Business is hard for people who are well networked. It's harder for people who are not. Business is hard for people who are educated. It's hard for people who are not. Business is hard for people who are skilled. It's also hard for people who are not skilled. And here's the thing about hard things: you will fail. In business, failure is guaranteed, and it's guaranteed before you hit a level of success. But failure is guaranteed. Today, I want to advocate for something. I want to advocate for a level of business risk and tolerance on the African continent in order for us to be successful. I want to advocate for the increased tolerance for business failure on the continent. And I want to talk about the reasons why I think that is. And before I'm misunderstood, I think let me set some preconditions for what and perhaps who I'm talking to and what I'm talking about. I want to be clear about who I'm not talking to. I'm not talking to the bystanders. I'm not talking to spectators. I'm not talking to people who sit on X or on social media platforms and mock people who fail in business. I'm also not talking to people who run criminal enterprises. This is not that at all, or people who capitulate because for one reason or the other they find themselves on the other side of the law. That's not who I'm addressing. I really want to talk to every entrepreneur who walks into, and because this is what business is, this is what business feels like. It feels like you've walked into the Roman Colosseum. You've walked into the arena. And that arena is exceptionally unforgiving. Um, and I'm talking to those who are in the arena. I'm talking to entrepreneurs. I'm talking to aspiring entrepreneurs. Um, and that's what I'm advocating for on the continent. I'm also talking to the people, and now you understand why I say I'm not talking to the bystanders, because within the arena, within the Colosseum, people understand, get to watch you fail. They get to watch you attempt, navigate the dynamics, and our continent has many of those. I'm also talking to the people who are really part and parcel of ensuring that entrepreneurs succeed. I'm talking to people who fund entrepreneurs. I'm talking to people who run startup incubators. I'm talking to organizations that support small and medium enterprises. That is the group of individuals for whom I think this message is for. It's directed to, because without that supportive ecosystem and without that supportive layer, we do not win. The reason I'm advocating for this is because failure on this continent is very stigmatized. Business failure is very stigmatized, and I think we need to move away from that. Universally, business has a very high failure rate. 90% of startups will fail. 2 out of 3 businesses will fail. And if you couple that with the big challenge we have, which is that our economies are not growing fast enough, and as a result, we are not creating jobs fast enough, we're going to have a problem. Our economic prosperity and success hinges on entrepreneurship. It hinges on our ability to foster entrepreneurs. The other reason I bring this up is because in other more developed markets, yes, it is a meritocracy. Yes, the thing about business is that you do get to win, and you do get to experience the losses. But one of the reasons markets like the US um, drive a lot of entrepreneurial success is because a lot of those entrepreneurs have failed over and over and over and over. And it's not always because there was a fraudulent event. It's just the dynamics, which I will talk about a little bit later. The dynamics of operating or running a business will get you to that point where you fail. You can take anyone, whether you list a Jeff Bezos. I think Jeff said in the beginning, and I'm talking here about difficulty and failure coupled as one. In order for him to raise $1 million, had to speak to about 100 investors or something like that. That takes a different level of tenacity. I think Elon Musk has failed at the Tesla phone. Um, there are many organizations, many companies that have failed. I'll bring it closer to home. The mighty Strive Masiviwa failed with Kwese. Um, and you almost have to assume that all those people, when you start a business, you are not like those people. And those are people with resources, et cetera, et cetera. So your, your attempt is almost guaranteed to fail. So I think that's the critical part, just in terms of who I want to talk to and why I'm advocating for this culture. The other thing I want to talk about is um, why you generally won't win the first time around. Um, and if we don't have an ecosystem where someone's going to sit with you and say, okay, let's identify the failure points, let's identify where you went wrong. And generally, there are three major buckets for why we fail, and I want to talk to some of this. The first is a product market mismatch. All right, so sometimes we create businesses and you're solving something that is not a real need, right? So there's a lack of a real need. You're building something nobody truly wants, or you're solving a problem that isn't urgent enough for someone to be willing to pay for it. The second thing within that is that there's a lack of differentiation. The market might already be saturated with the product you're trying to bring in, and your service doesn't stand out. The reason it causes failure is because there is no sustainable demand. You burn through resources. The thing about business is that your burn rate dictates how long you get to stay alive. If you're not in tune, if you're not in control of your burn rate, you typically lose. Um, and then another thing I'm very, very sort of careful about, and something I watch out for, and always share this with my friends and entrepreneurs, is that failing slowly is a really, really difficult way. And it's hard because you have to balance believing in your business and recognizing when you're failing. Generally, when you're failing slowly, you see enough green shoots for you to keep going. But fundamentally, within the bigger picture, the product market fit, the competition, the saturation, etc., is going to drown you out. And so, if you're slow to pivot, you're definitely going to lose. And I think that late realization is hard. Um, I know that I've personally failed at something for about 5 years, until I decided, okay, enough is enough. But it took a lot of white knuckling, and that that is a really difficult position to be in, because when you're an entrepreneur, you're in your idea maze. You know, and you believe in your business and you believe in yourself. And sometimes you're married to an idea, and that's always something hard for every entrepreneur. I think it's discretionary as to how you go about addressing that. And then a local context point of view, very little local adaptation. I think that sometimes, particularly in tech startups, we, you know, entrepreneurs tend to take an idea that they believe works elsewhere and want to execute that exact idea on the continent. And I'll give an example. I think direct to consumer apps or platforms are really difficult to execute in this market, and you may not always win because consumer purchasing power is low. The adoption of apps is super low. The price of data is super expensive, and so converting and just we don't have the unit economics to always succeed at a direct to consumer level. And I think that's an important piece. So the second reason, so that's the first reason, product market mismatch. The second reason is uh, poor execution and team dynamics. Um, I I s- I'm sort of married to the fact that execution is the variable of success. If I want to do something, I get closer to it. and iteration has to be possible. And here I'm talking about weak leadership or a skills gap. Either the founder and the core team lack the managerial experience, the technical know-how, as well as the marketing know-how to execute on the vision. A lot of times there's team misalignment. Usually businesses fall apart when there's co-founder conflicts. The moment two co-founders no longer see the same thing and they go their separate ways, I think that's where the business dies. And then just operational efficiencies. We're not organized. You don't have an organized process. Your roles are not clear. And then there's just a failure to plan for scaling, right? So, and these are critical things within that. And I also want to say governance. It's such a heavy word when you're just starting your business. You don't want to hear about governance, but that's really critical. Now, understanding what it is to run a business diligently, something I think we lack, and that's why we also fail. The reason it causes a lot of failure is oftentimes missed targets. Whether you've set the targets yourselves or you've agreed as a team on what the targets are going to be. You fail to meet the promise. You have failed to scale effectively, and as a result, you lose credibility with your customers and with your investors. I think that's difficult. It also causes failure when there's internal conflict. Again, the founder dispute, a toxic culture it will just rapidly derail the progress. And then the inability to attract and retain talent. Skilled individuals or employees, they often leave environments where they feel like they lack growth potential or the leadership to lead them in the right direction. I think that um, from a from a local market point of view, there's a I think there's a talent shortage in certain specialized skills, software development, engineering, regulatory expertise, and these can sometimes be harder to find. We also have sort of this mentorship a gap that you often don't get in many regions. You're often starting your company or your business all by yourself, and you are learning everything by yourself, and there's an expense to that, and oftentimes that expense could be you losing your business. The third reason is financial and external constraints is the reason we fail. Um, and this is fundamental. And the reason I said, people without money fail is that you have a funding shortfall. You have a funding shortfall. You're unable to meet your obligations. And strategically, I know Elon once said about Tesla. He said if we paid all our bills on time, we'd go bankrupt. And often, as an entrepreneur, what you're managing is cash flow. So the skill to manage the cash flow, the skill to have relationships with your customers, I think is quite critical where that's concerned. Economic and policy shifts. I think something that's very critical to our continent. For those who play, in the commodities game, understand that quite, extensively. It could also just be recessions, currency fluctuations, trade regulations, tariffs. Um, and those are things that impact the bottom line. Infrastructure is another problem. I think that it's a big reason. It's actually a major reason why people fail. I had a near. I'm going to put it this way. I had the privilege of a near death experience. I'm going to tell the story very quickly. My partner and I invested in a mining operation in the DRC. Um, the trip and the location is 600 kilometers outside of Kinshasa. In order for us to get there, it is a 24-hour drive. Okay, you would drive from Kinshasa to Kimpese, from Kimpese to Luozi, from Luozi Kimwaka. It doesn't matter. I just want you to understand that there are four major places to go there. The first time I went on this trip, I'm actually going to give Teddy the pictures of where this was. And it's just to show you, and I want to show it from a local context point of view, just how difficult it is to win. when you have infrastructure challenges. Something that is supposed to be a 6, possibly if you have all the infrastructure in place, it should possibly be a 6-hour drive. If you could fly down, it should be a 2-hour flight. But because you have to go by road, you drive, and it's a literal 24-hour drive. The first trip I made to that place was okay, except for the fact that we had about 7 to 8 breakdowns on the way. The road is absolutely treacherous. I remember multiple events where we'd experienced these breakdowns. There was one particular event, I was even on the phone with my partner, and he hears this truck hooting in the background. We were stuck in the middle of the road. Um, and I was talking to him, and I end up running to the car because we had to push the car out of the way because this truck is just beltering towards us. We would hit potholes so hard, or humps, or holes that would just switch off the car immediately. And suddenly we'd been driving for 2 hours, and then suddenly the car stops after you've hit a really strong pothole, and it's off. You're in the middle of nowhere. There is no signage. It is dark.
Well, the thing is, it's already dark. We are in the middle of nowhere. That's the bushes. That's them checking it out. And that's the road.
Funny enough, we felt safe because it wasn't that kind of place. But you look left, you look right, you have no idea. Um, and 2 hours later, your mechanic sort of figures out what it was. Truckers were often stuck on the side of the road, and they would walk to you and see how they can help you, etc., etc. And then that was the first trip. I remember thinking, man, I hope what I'm chasing is worth what it's costing me. It was a hard trip. It was a really difficult trip. Anyway, that was that. And the prospect of what we were going for was good. That was the first trip. The second trip is the one where we have, we changed our car, so we purchased a new vehicle, and we go on this drive again. It is slightly rainy season, and this is the first time. The drive there is again exceptionally difficult. There are parts of the road where you are driving on clay, and we were in a 4x4 Hilux Bucky. You do not get a more durable car than that. We're in a 4x4 Hilux Bucky, but there are parts of the trip where we begin driving on what feels like clay, and the car just begins to slide, and you're on a hill, and you don't know whether you're going to tip over or not. On I always asked my business partner was, how do you know where we're going? Because there is zero signage, there is zero direction. This way, 100 kilometers to Kimwaka, 700 meters to. There is zero direction signage on this. And then we had this incident, this experience with what we call le bac. It's essentially um, you get to Luozi, and you have to cross the Congo River with um, a single ferry. It's a very fancy word, but it's the word that makes sense. You have to cross the river on a ferry. Oh,
Là maintenant, on arrive à Kimbemba pour prendre le bac et traverser à Luozi.
when you're crossing this river, the first thing is we're constantly fighting for space on the ferry. So if whatever time you arrive, you have to make sure that you are first in line, and that you stay in line. You can't go too far from your car because someone's going to take your spot. I actually have a video of where we wrestle to get onto the ferry, and it is the most catastrophic, the most chaotic experience you have ever seen. There are trucks that have loads that probably have like 2 to 3 meter loads getting onto this ferry. and this ferry has to cross. When the ferry breaks down, you are stuck on either side from anything from 2 days to a week. And that's just like the sort of infrastructure challenges you have. If the ferry gets stuck mid-river, mid-river, you have no choice but to wait until they fix the ferry. All right. And that was, so on our way there, we get there and it was all right. My return was when we had the incident. So what's happened to these roads is that, and if you've been to Ndola, it's something similar. The far edges of the road, because the trucks driving on the road have become so heavy, the far edges of the road are wobbly, right? So they wobbly. If you move to the one side too much, you feel the wobbliness of this thing. Um, and on the return, this is my first time driving in Kinshasa, a country I'm born in, um, and I get to experience this driving. We in this Hilux. I can tell you that we did not see less than 100 breakdowns of trucks tipping over, of accidents, of people just driving in a way that is inexplicable. We I had two incidents. There was this thing where you would drive on the road and you're consistently driving, and because there are no lights on the road, you'd be driving and suddenly the road disappears. And the reason the road disappears is because there's something dark in front of you, and you only see it when you're about 10 meters away. And what it would be is a stuck truck. Oftentimes on a curve, you're going up, you're going downhill on a curve. There are no triangles. They don't put triangles. No one's got lights. No one's standing in front of you. And the first time we did this, I literally drove and suddenly the road disappears and I just hit the brakes. And I hit the brakes, arriving at this truck like this right in front of us. And that was some of the dynamics we were experiencing. The moment we had this near death experience, because what was on the other side of this, what was on the other side of this incident is something different. I don't think I would have been here. So we start driving, the roads weave, um, and I've never seen truckers drive more recklessly. There isn't a place on earth I've ever seen truckers drive more recklessly. The speed at which they drive, how they drive. So sometimes you actually have to switch on your hazards just so that people know that you're a car. With the wheel on either side, you have to drive with the hazards on. But what the truckers would do is they would overtake anywhere. And when they're coming down a slope, and this is where the incident happens, there's a truck driver driving down a slope. He is going fast, extremely fast. And as I observe, he is now into our lane on a curve. I decide I'm going to move the car to the right. As I move the car to the right, the car hits, and this is at high speed, so we're not driving slowly. This is at high speeds. Um, I move the car to the right, and then suddenly I hit the wobbly parts of the road, and I lose control of the car. We lose control of the car and we weave. We weave back, and I don't know how this happens. We weave back, and the next thing I see is we are about to be under this guy's truck. There are moments when you say you've seen your life flash right in front of you. It was one of those moments. It was literally the car, and we are about to be under this guy's tire. Um, I don't know what it is. I don't know what happened. I had maybe what you might call a Jesus take the wheel moment. And in some way, shape, or form, I held on to the steering wheel and the car just straightened itself out. And our lives were spared by, I think, centimeters. Centimeters. I think I was in so much shock. I was in so much shock that I think we almost pulled over. We couldn't pull over because the road doesn't allow you. And I remember my partner saying, my business partner saying, uh, that was uh, that was close. Um, he said it in French, but he said something else that I'm not going to repeat here. But that was close. And I ended up deciding that very moment, I ended up deciding, um, there are better ways to get money. I ended up deciding there are better ways to get money. I saw everything. Um, And that is some of the dynamics entrepreneurs face on this continent. Sometimes these infrastructure issues are enough to exhaust you. They're enough for you to decide. And the sad thing about it is because we were investing in that community, our exiting um, means that whatever capital flows were going to go to that community goes with it, and there's an exit there. It's a dynamic market. Lots to talk about, and I'm sure everybody's got stories around that. But that's infrastructure, and it's one of the things that really causes us to fail, whether it's transportation, or just your general health. That's the story I wanted to share. Anyway, so back to the third reason we fail. I was talking about finances. And within that, it was funding shortfall, it was the economic policies, infrastructure and regulation. Why it causes failure: cash flow, unforeseen market failure, or market changes, and then just investor hesitancy. Um, and I think that that's a critical thing. From an African context, the financial challenges are that oftentimes the high cost of capital is what keeps us from launching, be it interest rates. Um, you know, the high cost of capital can be very prohibitive actually for you to run a great business. Um, Early stage funding is hard to secure. You're dealing with fragmented markets, um, different tax regimes and that sort of complexity that you have to navigate if you're going to operate in multiple markets. Um, and then again, the infrastructure gaps. These are real gaps. I've spoken in a video before about the ease of doing business. I think infrastructure is exceptionally important where that's concerned. And then there's one more thing about why we fail. And this is a dynamic of the arena itself. I'm very keen to get your thoughts on this. So please share your thoughts in the comments. There's something called unteachable lessons in business. It's a weird thing, but it's a real thing. No one can teach you resourcefulness. No one can teach you how to improvise. No one can teach you grit and tenacity. No one can teach you humility and empathy. No one can teach you some hard skills, risk assessment skills. No one can teach you how to stay focused. Oftentimes, your gift or your skill will take you places your character can't keep you, your morality can't keep you, and those are the unteachable lessons. It's I can't teach you. I think we can be taught leadership. I can't teach you how to be. I don't think it can be taught. Being an entrepreneur just brings moments where the spreadsheet and the textbook doesn't tell you which way to go. It's all intuition. Um, and that's what I'm advocating for. I'm advocating for um, a tolerance for business failure. Entrepreneurs who fail and who fail for real market reasons deserve a second shot. They deserve to have someone mentor them and show them, okay, I see where you messed up. These are the things to avoid. Um, and that's what makes us. That's what's going to make us anti-fragile. The more you fail, the more you the more anti-fragile you become if you go try again. Um, that's the culture we need to develop successful entrepreneurs on this continent. Um, Thank you for watching. Um, this is a this is a very touching episode for me because I remember up until very few weeks I hadn't told that story even to my family. I had to tell them first before I told it publicly. But I think what I experienced is just something very small that other entrepreneurs on this continent experience on a day by day basis. Um, this is Win is Win. I'm Ted Coker.